You think you're waiting for money, but money is waiting for you to stop monitoring it and assume the Sabbath of wealth. Money has never been something you chase without consequence. It has always been something you relate to, whether you realize it or not. The moment you stop seeing money as an object outside of you and begin to recognize it as a response to your inner state, a quiet shift occurs. Most people exhaust themselves running after results, believing effort alone persuades money to arrive, yet they never question the relationship they are maintaining internally. They assume money is deaf, mechanical, indifferent, but money, like everything else in your world, responds, not to motion, not to force, but to assumption. Neville Goddard taught with unwavering clarity that everything in your life moves according to what you assume to be true, and money is not exempt from this law. It does not operate by moral rules, social struggle, or personal worthiness. It follows the same invisible command that governs health, relationships, and opportunity. When Neville spoke of Jesus speaking to the fig tree, he was not offering a historical anecdote or a religious metaphor meant for belief alone. He was revealing a principle. Inner speech directs outer supply. The fig tree did not respond to pleading or effort. It responded to assumption spoken with authority. Money responds in exactly the same way. This is why the idea of talking to money has been misunderstood. It is not superstition, ritual, or speaking aloud to paper bills or bank screens. It is the constant, quiet dialogue you carry within yourself about money, what you expect from it, how you feel when you think of it, and whether your inner tone is one of authority or apology. You are always talking to money, whether you intend to or not. The question is not whether you speak, but what you are saying beneath the surface of your awareness. When you begin to observe your inner agreement with money, you start to see why effort alone has never been enough. Dr. Joe Vitale emphasized that money flows only where there is subconscious permission. You may consciously desire wealth, yet unconsciously reject it through guilt, fear, or unworthiness. The subconscious does not respond to desire. It responds to agreement. Until your inner conversations align with allowance, money cannot remain no matter how hard you work for it. Wealth does not change when circumstances improve. Circumstances improve when the relationship changes. The way you internally greet money determines whether it feels welcome or foreign, temporary or stable. When money senses tension, justification, or desperation in your inner tone, it behaves accordingly. When it senses familiarity, authority, and neutrality, it settles in naturally. This is not mysticism, it is law. Money is not moved by what you say you want, but by who you assume yourself to be in relation to it. What unsettles most people is not the idea that money responds to them, but the realization that it already has been all along. Every delay, every sudden expense, every brief surge followed by disappearance has not been random or unfair. It has been precise. Money has been answering faithfully, yet not to effort, persistence, or even intelligence. It has been responding to assumption. This is why two people can apply equal energy, skill, and time, yet experience radically different financial outcomes. One feels perpetually behind no matter how hard they push, while the other seems to receive support with far less strain. The difference is not visible on the surface, but it is absolute beneath it. Imagine money as a customer service line that does not react to volume, repetition, or emotional urgency. You can shout, plead, explain your situation, or threaten consequences, and nothing changes. But the moment your tone shifts into calm expectation, into quiet certainty, the response alters immediately. The line was never broken. It was listening the entire time, but it was trained to respond only to authority. Money functions in the same way. It does not move faster when you beg, and it does not become generous when you justify your need. It responds when it recognizes a tone it understands. This is why effort alone often feels exhausting rather than empowering. Effort without assumption is noise. You can work longer hours, chase opportunities, and multiply strategies, yet still feel as though money remains just out of reach. Meanwhile, someone else makes a single decision, speaks internally from certainty, and life rearranges itself to support them. This is not because money prefers them as a person, but because money recognizes their inner posture. It hears confidence where others hear struggle. Once this is seen, a subtle but profound shift begins. If money listens, then how you speak to it internally becomes more important than how loudly you act externally. The inner tone you carry while earning, spending, or thinking about money sets the terms of the relationship. Are you negotiating from fear, from justification, from urgency, or are you speaking from expectation, familiarity, and calm authority? Money does not argue with your assumptions. It simply agrees with them and expresses that agreement as circumstance. This is the disruption that changes everything. You are not waiting for money to notice you. It has never stopped paying attention. The only question is what it has been hearing from you all along. If this shifts how money listens to you, subscribe and stay aligned with these assumptions. Weird assumption number 1. Money has memory. Money does not arrive in a vacuum, and it does not forget how it has been treated within you. Long before a paycheck, a payment, or an opportunity appears, there is already a history at work beneath the surface. Every emotional reaction you have ever had around money leaves an imprint, not on money itself, but on your relationship with it. Frustration, relief, guilt, excitement, fear, these are not fleeting moments, they are signals. Over time, they form a pattern, and money responds to that pattern with remarkable consistency. Consider how people return to places where they feel comfortable. A guest does not stay long in a home filled with tension, apology, or unspoken resentment. They may visit briefly, but they do not linger. Money behaves the same way. It gravitates toward emotional environments where it feels welcomed, expected, and at ease. If money has only ever been associated with stress, arguments, or relief, followed by anxiety, it learns its role in your life. It comes quickly, leaves quickly, or arrives only in small amounts because that is the emotional script it has been given. This is why repeating external actions without addressing the inner climate rarely produces lasting change. You may increase income temporarily, but the old emotional pattern quietly pulls money back into familiar behavior. The mind remembers how money is supposed to feel. If wealth feels foreign, unstable, or undeserved at an emotional level, money cannot remain without creating discomfort. And what the subconscious finds uncomfortable, it resolves by returning to what feels normal, even if that normal is limitation. The moment the emotional atmosphere shifts, money's behavior shifts with it. When money is no longer met with tension, apology, or exaggerated gratitude, but with calm familiarity, it begins to settle. It stops rushing in and out. It no longer needs to prove anything or escape anything. This is not because money has changed, but because the memory you hold of it has been rewritten. Money responds to the emotional climate you maintain, not the explanations you give yourself afterward. To change how money behaves, the relationship must change at the level where memory lives. When the emotional tone becomes one of ease rather than vigilance, of recognition rather than surprise, money no longer feels like a visitor. It feels like it belongs. Weird assumption number 2. Money moves toward authority, not need. There is a subtle but decisive difference between need and authority, and money responds to that difference without exception. Need carries urgency, justification, and an unspoken request for permission. Authority carries expectation, calmness, and an inner sense of command. Most people believe money is attracted to effort or desperation, yet desperation only amplifies the awareness of absence. The more urgently money is needed, the louder the inner admission becomes that it is not present, and money responds by staying away. Think of how people respond to leadership. An employee does not move faster when a manager panics, explains their desperation, or begs for results. Panic erodes trust. Desperation confuses direction. But when authority is present, quiet, grounded, and assumed, action follows naturally. Money behaves in the same way. It does not respond to emotional pressure or dramatic desire. It responds to the inner posture of command that assumes supply as normal. Authority is not something you announce to the world, and it is not something you perform through confidence rituals or outward bravado. Authority is felt internally. It is the absence of explanation in your inner dialogue, the lack of urgency in your expectations, the quiet assumption that money knows where to go and how to arrive. When authority is present, there is no need to convince money, because there is no inner doubt that it belongs. This is why effort driven by need often produces exhaustion rather than relief. The more one tries to force money to appear, the more the inner tone reveals dependency. Money hears that tone clearly. It hears the lack of assumption, the sense of separation, and it responds accordingly. Meanwhile, when authority replaces need, actions become fewer, simpler, and more effective. Decisions feel clean rather than pressured, and opportunities appear without struggle. Money moves toward the one who assumes command internally, not because that person is demanding, but because their inner state leaves no room for negotiation. Authority does not chase, it expects, and money, responding faithfully to assumption, follows that expectation without resistance. Weird assumption, data 3. Money likes familiar identity. Money does not struggle to find you, it settles where it feels recognized. Identity is the quiet anchor that determines whether money passes through your life or stabilizes within it. Long before numbers change on a screen or opportunities present themselves, there is already an internal recognition happening. Money aligns itself with the version of you it is accustomed to meeting. If your self-concept has remained unchanged, money behaves consistently, no matter how much you try to override it with surface-level intention. There is a profound difference between being addressed by a name you have outgrown and being called by the one that truly belongs to you. When someone uses an old nickname that no longer fits, there is a subtle resistance, a sense of misalignment. Money experiences something similar. If your inner identity still reflects scarcity, struggle, or instability, money cannot fully recognize itself in you. It may arrive briefly, but it does not know where to stay because the identity it encounters feels temporary or unfamiliar. This is why sudden financial increases often fade just as quickly. The outer result changes faster than the inner identity can adjust. When money arrives in amounts that do not match the self-concept, discomfort follows. The subconscious seeks alignment, not excess. It restores familiarity by returning money to levels that feel known. Money is not punishing, it is stabilizing. It remains loyal to identity, not to desire. Identity is not changed by affirmation alone. It is installed through repetition, emotional acceptance, and quiet assumption. When wealth becomes a familiar state internally, money no longer needs to test your readiness or trigger anxiety. It recognizes itself in you and responds with consistency. The moment identity shifts beneath awareness, money's behavior shifts without resistance. Money stays where it feels known. When your inner sense of self aligns with ease, sufficiency, and permanence, money no longer behaves like an occasional visitor. It behaves like something that belongs. Weird assumption, number 4. Inner speech is your real financial strategy. Long before money ever appears in physical form, negotiations have already taken place within you. Every agreement, every refusal, every expectation is first spoken inwardly, often without words, as tone, implication, and assumption. Neville Goddard called this the law of inner conversations, and he meant it literally. The dialogue you maintain with yourself about money is not commentary. It is instruction. It sets the terms under which money is allowed to arrive, remain, or disappear. Most people believe strategy lives in plans, budgets, or external decisions, yet the real strategy unfolds quietly in imagination. You rehearse outcomes before they occur. You anticipate resistance, delays, or ease. You hear yourself justifying purchases, explaining lack, or reassuring yourself that money will eventually come. These inner exchanges feel private, but they are not inconsequential. They are contracts. By the time money shows up as an event, the terms have already been agreed upon internally. Think of how contracts are negotiated before they are signed. The paper is only a formality. The real agreement happens in conversation long before ink touches the page. Inner speech functions the same way. You are constantly negotiating your financial reality in advance, deciding what feels reasonable, what feels possible, and what feels out of reach. Money simply arrives to formalize what has already been settled in consciousness. This is why changing outer behavior, without changing inner dialogue, produces limited results. You may adopt better habits, increase effort, or seek new opportunities, yet the old conversations continue uninterrupted beneath the surface. Money responds to those conversations because they are consistent, familiar, and emotionally charged. Until the inner dialogue shifts, the outer pattern remains loyal to what it has been instructed to maintain. Inner speech does not change easily through force or repetition alone. It shifts most naturally when the mind is relaxed, when resistance softens, and when the conscious guard lowers. In that quieter state, assumptions can be rewritten without argument. When inner conversations change at their source, money does not need to be persuaded. It simply follows the new agreement into form. Weird assumption number 5. Money arrives when you stop monitoring it. There is a point at which attention stops being productive and starts becoming interference. Money responds to awareness, but not to surveillance. The more closely it is watched, measured, and emotionally tracked, the more resistance is introduced into the relationship. Monitoring carries an unspoken question, and that question is whether money is truly here or about to leave. Money hears that uncertainty clearly and answers it with delay, fluctuation, or absence. Neville Goddard referred to this state of release as the Sabbath, a psychological rest that follows assumption. It is not indifference, and it is not neglect. It is the quiet neutrality that comes after something has already been accepted as done. Just as a watched pot seems never to boil, money resists appearing when it is under constant emotional observation. The moment attention loosens, the mechanism completes its work without interference. This is why people often experience financial movement when they stop checking, calculating, or emotionally leaning into the outcome. The inner tension dissolves, and with it, the signal of doubt. Money does not need encouragement at that point. It needs space. Neutrality communicates trust more clearly than hope ever could. When the mind rests, money is free to move. Letting go is often misunderstood as giving up, yet it is actually a form of authority. It implies that nothing needs to be proven or confirmed. The assumption has already been accepted internally, so monitoring becomes unnecessary. In that state, money no longer feels pressured to perform. It arrives quietly, naturally, often in ways that feel ordinary rather than dramatic. When attention relaxes, a hidden mechanism activates. Events align without strain, timing resolves itself, and movement occurs without emotional charge. Money does not announce these shifts. It simply responds to the absence of resistance and completes what was already assumed. There exists a state of consciousness where effort loses its grip and intention becomes effortless, where the mind is no longer arguing with itself and identity can pass through without resistance. Neville Goddard called this the state akin to sleep, not because it is unconscious or passive, but because it is the threshold where the rational mind softens its control and deeper assumptions become accessible. In this state, you are not trying to change reality. You are allowing reality to reorganize itself around a newly accepted sense of self. Money responds most clearly here because this is where identity is received, not debated. Most people misunderstand why repetition often feels ineffective. They repeat affirmations, visualize outcomes, or rehearse statements while fully awake, alert, and guarded. In that condition, the mind evaluates, compares, and resists. Every repetition becomes an argument, and every argument reinforces the old identity. SATS works differently. It bypasses the need to convince. It allows the assumption to be experienced as natural, rather than asserted as hopeful. In this state, the mind does not ask whether something is reasonable or deserved. It simply accepts what is being felt as true. This is why SATS is best understood as identity transmission rather than manifestation technique. You are not asking money to change its behavior. You are not directing outcomes or managing details. You are introducing yourself from a place of quiet certainty. Think of the difference between repeatedly explaining who you are to someone versus introducing yourself once with clarity and calm. Explanation implies insecurity. Introduction implies authority. SATS functions as that introduction. Money does not need repeated instructions once it recognizes who you are. In the state akin to sleep, the body relaxes, the breath deepens, and the sense of time softens. Thoughts slow down, not because they are forced to stop, but because they are no longer needed to protect identity. This is where the feeling of being financially secure, supported, or abundant can be experienced without contradiction. Not as excitement, not as fantasy, but as familiarity. That feeling is the language money understands best. It is not emotional intensity that installs identity. It is emotional neutrality paired with certainty. When identity is introduced this way, it does not feel dramatic. There is no rush of adrenaline, no sense of anticipation. Instead, there is a quiet recognition, almost like remembering something rather than creating it. This subtlety is important. Money stabilizes where there is calm recognition, not where there is emotional charge. SATS allows the identity of ease, sufficiency, and authority to be felt as normal, and normal is what the subconscious preserves. After this identity has been introduced, the conscious mind often attempts to return to old patterns. Thoughts may arise that question timing, evidence, or logic. Emotional reflexes tied to past experiences may resurface. This does not indicate failure or reversal. It indicates adjustment. The system is recalibrating around a new center. Identity does not need to be defended once it has been accepted. It expresses itself through changed reactions rather than forced discipline. You may notice that situations which once triggered anxiety now feel neutral. Decisions feel simpler. There is less emotional attachment to outcomes. These are not signs of indifference. They are signs of authority. Money responds to this shift by reorganizing itself naturally. Opportunities appear without urgency. Timing improves without effort. Events unfold in ways that feel coincidental, yet perfectly aligned. SATS does not compel money through imagination. It removes the resistance that prevented money from behaving differently in the first place. By teaching money who you are now, you no longer need to monitor, manage, or persuade. Money adjusts quietly, faithfully, and without drama, because it is responding to a new identity that has already been accepted as true. Once an assumption has been accepted and identity has shifted, the mind often expects a dramatic turning point, a visible moment where everything changes at once. Yet this expectation misunderstands how reality rearranges itself. Neville referred to the unfolding process as the bridge of incidents, not because it is mysterious, but because it is natural. The bridge is not designed to impress you. It is designed to feel ordinary enough that resistance does not re-enter the system. Money rarely arrives through events that announce themselves as manifestations. Instead, it moves through sequences that feel logical in hindsight, but unremarkable in the moment. A conversation happens at the right time. A delay redirects you toward a better outcome. An unexpected refund, offer, or timing shift appears without emotional weight. These are not signs of luck or coincidence. They are the outer world conforming to a new inner agreement. The bridge of incidents is subtle because drama would invite doubt. If money arrived in a way that felt too sudden or overwhelming, the old identity might react with suspicion or anxiety. The subconscious prefers continuity. It reshapes reality through steps that feel acceptable to the identity now in place. This is why the bridge often looks like normal life continuing, just with fewer obstacles and better timing. Money does not need to shock you into belief. It only needs to arrive in a way that feels natural to who you now assume yourself to be. This process explains why people sometimes overlook their own financial shifts. They are waiting for a single defining moment, while the change is actually occurring through a series of small, coordinated adjustments. Resistance dissolves quietly. Decisions feel easier. Circumstances line up without force. Money responds through paths that do not require explanation, because explanation would imply disbelief. The bridge works best when it feels unsurprising. Another important aspect of the bridge is that it does not require your supervision. Once identity has shifted, monitoring the process only reintroduces the old state. The bridge unfolds on its own because it is not being built consciously. It is assembled by assumption. Each incident leads naturally to the next, guided by the same internal authority that initiated the change. Nothing needs to be rushed and nothing needs to be corrected. What appears as delay is often alignment. What appears as redirection is often precision. The bridge does not move in straight lines because life rarely does. Yet every step is coherent when viewed from the end. Money arrives not as a reward for patience, but as a confirmation of assumption. It flows through the bridge because the inner agreement has already been made. This brings everything to a quiet conclusion. There is no final effort required, no emotional climax to chase. The instruction is implicit rather than stated. When identity is assumed and inner speech has shifted, money responds through natural sequences that feel almost invisible. The bridge of incidents does not demand belief. It reveals it, step by step, through a reality that quietly agrees with who you have decided to be. Money is obedient to assumption, not effort. Everything you have explored up to this point converges on a single stabilizing realization. Money has never been reacting to your effort in isolation. Effort may shape the form through which money arrives, but it has never determined whether it arrives, how long it stays, or how naturally it circulates in your life. Those outcomes have always been governed by assumption. Long before an action is taken or a decision is made, an inner agreement has already set the terms. Money follows that agreement with precision, not because it chooses to, but because it cannot do otherwise. This understanding reframes years of struggle for many people. It explains why intense effort can coexist with stagnation, and why ease sometimes appears where little visible striving exists. Money is not measuring your discipline or judging your worth. It is responding to the identity you occupy and the inner tone you carry when you think about it. When effort is driven by tension or urgency, it reinforces the assumption that money is absent or difficult. When action flows from authority and expectation, money responds differently because the assumption beneath the action has changed. The phrase "talking to money" has meaning only at this deeper level. It was never intended to suggest superstition or performative affirmation. It points to the inner dialogue that runs quietly and continuously, shaping your relationship with money without your conscious participation. Every thought of anticipation, worry, relief, or justification speaks on your behalf. Money listens not to your words, but to the emotional posture behind them. It responds to what feels settled within you, not to what you are trying to convince yourself is true. Neville Goddard expressed this principle through the image of reflection. Money, like all circumstances, functions as a mirror. It does not initiate behavior or decide outcomes. It reflects the assumptions that are already in place. If you assume struggle as normal, money mirrors instability. If you assume effort must precede relief, money delays its arrival. When you assume familiarity, ease, and continuity, money reflects those assumptions with equal faithfulness. The mirror does not change on its own. It changes when what stands before it changes. This is why awareness alone does not produce results. Intellectual understanding can coexist with unchanged outcomes if the inner agreement remains untouched. Dr. Joe Vitale emphasized that subconscious permission governs financial flow. You may consciously desire wealth, yet unconsciously withhold permission through identities formed around struggle, sacrifice, or conditional worth. Money cannot override that permission. It must be invited through acceptance, not pursuit. When permission is granted, money no longer feels like something that must be chased or defended. It begins to behave as something that belongs. The shift that allows this permission is rarely dramatic. It is not marked by excitement or certainty in the way people expect. Instead, it arrives as neutrality. Emotional charge fades. The urge to monitor outcomes weakens. Inner conversations lose urgency and explanation. This neutrality is not indifference, it is authority. It signals that the assumption has been accepted deeply enough that it no longer requires reinforcement. In this state, money is free to move because there is nothing resisting it internally. What follows is not chaos or unpredictability, but order. Circumstances align in ways that feel natural rather than forced. Opportunities appear without emotional pressure. Timing improves without effort. Money begins to arrive through paths that do not demand attention or validation. These changes often go unnoticed at first because they do not announce themselves. They feel normal. That sense of normality is the clearest indication that assumption has shifted. When the state akin to sleep is used to introduce a new identity, the conversation with money ends quietly. There is no need for repetition or reinforcement. Identity, once accepted, expresses itself automatically. Old reactions may attempt to resurface, but they no longer carry the same authority. They fade because they are no longer aligned with the assumption now in place. Money responds not to vigilance, but to coherence between identity and expectation. At this point, money is no longer experienced as an external force that must be controlled or managed emotionally. It becomes responsive, cooperative, and predictable in its own way. The relationship stabilizes. Fluctuations lose their emotional impact. Decisions feel cleaner. The sense of separation dissolves, replaced by familiarity. Money behaves differently because it is responding to someone different. Neville summarized this law with deceptive simplicity. When you assume the feeling of wealth, you do not wait for wealth to arrive so that you can feel secure. The feeling comes first, and wealth follows as its reflection. Money does not need to be persuaded, corrected, or impressed. It only needs to recognize you. And when assumption settles into identity, recognition is inevitable.